All right, so I'm just singing to myself. I'm sorry, but we're live now, so that means that people can be expecting some things. All right, so I'm just gonna. All right, cool. We got it off. Today we're going to be going over a few things. First and foremost, we're going to be going over how based priests are right now, and I'm going to show you the data to back that up. And then I'm going to relate that to some of the data that I have shown so far in the past, and then we'll talk with chat if chat gets lively. If not, we'll just ignore chat because chat's not there. I do have a poll, and if you're watching from YouTube, please vote in that poll just to engage. It's a fun poll. So as you may have heard from different groups, that the priests are getting more and more conservative. They're getting more and more orthodox. And that's not just a feeling anymore, right? Like it's backed up by statistical analysis on a very well-grounded study that, in my opinion, almost oversampled what they were doing, because they tried to sample 10,000 priests and they ended up sampling 3,512. And given there's about 33,000 priests, like that's 10%. That's a large number. That's a really large number. So that's great proportionally. So let's see. Okay, thank you, Mark. Sorry, I'm just reading what Mark. I'm not gonna put it up because I don't wanna associate his name in a bad way. If his priest happens to watch, well, whatever. All right, now I just gave it away. So, anyways, I'm just gonna keep going. Yeah, so we're gonna go over that. Let's see. Let me try to put this up. Why isn't it doing it? There we go. Okay. So this all kind of started with the New York Times, because the study had been done last year and the New York Times kind of opened it up. And the article isn't actually bad. Like when you read it, the article is actually really good. And when you're reading through that, you expect, because it's the New York Times, it to be like really negative, but it's not. It's very positive. And they have a lot of like very good quotes that promote like exactly what you want to see. I cannot put that up. I cannot put that up. But they did put in, a lot of good things in here. And so I'd like to just read one part of it where they're talking to a deacon Deacon Galante, or Gallant, I don't know, depending on where he comes from. I don't exactly know. Soon to be Father Galante. I'm just going to go with Galante, make it sound like a little bit more Latin than it needs to be. There was a time where the church maybe apologized for being Catholic, he said later in the conversation. He and the other new priests agreed that they were called to something different, advancing the Catholic faith, even the parts that could seem out of place in an increasingly hostile world. The church is Catholic, and we should announce that joyfully, he said. And so that is exactly what you want to hear from priests. You don't want to hear that. They're glad to be priests, right? Like they're glad to give their lives for the church and to serve me and you and the rest of the laity. And that's exactly the type of attitude you want. Let's see. So they talk about, obviously they always bring up the abuse crisis, right? So expect to, if you're going to read this, expect to read that. I'm not going to just read it in front of you. But there's a lot of nice pictures, like, that look at all the ordinations. That is like significantly more than many dioceses in the United States. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, there's eight men becoming fathers. Like that's a nice number. Like, obviously everybody would want more, but that is a That is a great lineup. This picture is great. I don't remember what diocese they're in. Milwaukee. So Milwaukee Seminarians. So that is great to see. And again, their attitude is there, and they're prostrate because to symbolize their dependence on God. So, but like I said, the study does by the Catholic Project at Catholic University of America, 3,500 priests, and so that's what this is. And it has what I have on my thumbnail. Although that's going to be really small for me to blow up, so I just took a picture of it, and we're going to do it this way. So it does go with the typical colors that you would expect. So blue, liberal, red, conservative. And you see very progressive in the dark blue, and you have very conservative / Orthodox on the right side. And I just cracked up when I watched this. When I started reading this, I just cracked up about conservative / Orthodox. Because the implication there, right, is that it's very progressive, is not it's not Orthodox. So it's like, that's kind of a problem when you're talking about a traditional faith like Catholicism, where literally things are passed down. You can't so like that to me, I thought was like really funny. Okay, so here's the thing. All right, so Mark, you bring up a good point. I think the priests are so based because all the other more liberal would-be priests have left the faith. The exodus of young people is very real, and so if they want to change church teaching, so like they right, because what you'll have is this component of, all right, well, do I want to be a priest or a social worker? Do I want to be a priest or a psychologist? Like, there's this dynamic there. And given the way things have gone, of course, the more conservative ones, the more Orthodox ones, according to the study, would be there because they take the faith seriously to the point of, well, if I'm going to give my life into something that is going to help people, I'm not going to go to be a social worker. I'm not going to be a psychologist to help with therapy or anything. I'm going to go into the priesthood. And the reason why I bring up those two things is because those two particular works, social worker is a humanitarian, like, for a lot of people, that's the humanitarian option. Well, I'm going to live poor and I'm going to help people. I'm going to be a social worker and I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to work for the state. And functionally, like, there is a place for it. Like, I'm not saying a social worker isn't needed in society, okay? But the way it's been perceived as our country has been given, like, going more and more to the left, it takes on a more priestly role, or I don't want to say priestly role as in like they do sacraments, because they don't, but they do serve, right? Like, they do a lot of the things that you would expect a priest to do or a deacon to do. And in terms of like how they help people. And so not entirely. So it's not a perfect fit, right? I don't want to give the impression that it is a perfect fit, but it's enough that I think a lot of people who are more left leaning are willing to go into that field as opposed to going into the priesthood. Especially if you have an understanding of hierarchy, like you reject it. Like, if you reject hierarchy, like if you're okay, well, like, left-leaning ones are typically the ones that are the ones that will promote like women ordination, women deacons, which is a subset of that, contraception, lenient on the killing of kids in the womb. So it makes sense that if they're already going against the church in those small things, you don't expect them to go in this big thing to the church, right? So, and I think that's what we're seeing. And I also wanted to add this. So what is this? This is the CARA information. I'm trying to like angle it to where it's not so bad, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Dang it. Okay, so let's try to move this to the right. So, because I want to show you like the difference, because I try to line it up as best I can. So let's bring it up to right here, because this is where the comparison actually starts, because it starts in 1970. So you have 805 ordinations. And so you have here the distribution of those 805 ordinations. Okay, so this is using two different data sets to reflect, to do a proper comparison to get a more round understanding of what's going on. And so we have in 1970, 805. And according to the sample here, some of them are, most of them were liberal, very few of them were conservative. And very few of them were very conservative. Like you can't even see the red line. And then as it goes out towards today, there's less priests, but there's a bigger focus on the Orthodox and the conservative, which every single time it's like, it's the weirdest thing, because for me personally, like I do associate conservative with Orthodox, not from a political perspective, because I look at it from what the church is teaching. And if someone's promoting, like, for example, women's ordination, which has been said, like, given the no several times now, I consider that someone liberal in trying to break open the church. And that's kind of how I view it, as opposed to someone promoting a progressive understanding in line with tradition. Okay, because there is a way of, this idea where there is progression within tradition. The problem is that we don't quite recognize it because the terms have been bastardized. Okay, so I'm just kind of giving you my look, because you conserve what is good, and then you work on that conservation, right? Like, you don't just sit in the same spot. You keep growing, and that's a good thing, to keep growing. And so that's just my little perspective on this. But again, like, there's more conservatives, and then you have like less priests. Like in 2015, like, that's the highest since just before 1995. So 515 to 511, and then you have a bit of a drop, and we're seeing here, excuse me, we're seeing here a like the difference between, like, you could almost say, like, the difference between what is there and what could be based off like historical trends is that the left are just, you could interpret this as something where it gives you an avenue to explain, well, the liberals are just leaving the faith, like, quite literally. Like, they're not not leaving the faith outright, but they're leaving the faith, like, they are called to be priests, but they're just choosing not to be priests, right? So that's what I mean. And so I think this gives a good indication, because of how this drop off happens in relation to, well, the people who are just there are conservative, and the left has left. And so that's kind of how I'm taking this, tentatively, right? Because it's not causal. You can't really show causality in that way, but it is pretty significant. Now, okay, given all of this, now the question is, why don't we see more masses like yours, Ryan? Like, why is your Reverent Novus Ordo still considered by many to be a unicorn? Okay, that's a really good question. And the reason why that's a really good question is because people, like, it shows an interest in it, right? Like, it's not just a really good question, like, gotcha, like, this study isn't actually as accurate as you think it is, or how you're interpreting this is slightly wrong. It's a really good question because people want that to be the case, especially people my age and younger. So again, I'm 36, if you don't know. And this idea of we want reverent masses. We're sick of the kumbaya version of what we've been given. We want what's authentic. We want what's in line with Vatican II, not whatever the priests' innovations are. And so here's the thing with that. It's kind of twofold. One, These are new ordinations. So in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be an impact. And it's going to be done in, like I said, 2 ways. The first one is the older liberal priests are going to be starting to retire. And then the bishops are going to be replaced. And the bishops being replaced is a huge deal. Because if you have a if you have a bishop that is kind of just keeping the status quo and looks at you as a priest. So imagine you're a priest for a second. Sorry, I have to take a drink. Something's scratching my throat. By the way, that is not a sponsor. So sorry. If you have a priest, or I'm sorry, a bishop that is very much about, hey, like, as long as you can justify all the actions that you're doing at your parish, we're going to go with it. It's going to be fine. Just go ahead and do it. If it looks more traditional, it's fine. Is your parish okay? Does your parish support it? Okay, well, we're just going to go with it. You have bishops like that. And then you have bishops that are like, well, that one person in the back got really mad because he saw your back. He saw your back, and I mean, like, he got really mad. And he does bring in some sort of money. So, like, that one person is going to spoil it for everybody. And so you do have bishops like that. And then you have other bishops that are like, yeah, this is never going to happen. We're going to make it so you do not have anything that looks like the traditional Latin Mass or what traditionally the church had promoted from Vatican II. And they're really promoting the spirit of Vatican II, which is the problem, right? Like, the spirit of Vatican II is not in line with the church. Okay. That is why, and you can look at Catholic Answers and other places where they describe like that as a type of heresy, because they're implementing something. It's an implementation that goes contra, in nature to Vatican II. And that's like a real problem. And that's why, like, whenever people who go into the TLM, they will usually cite, at least, okay, this is anecdotally for me, but the people that I've met, when I asked, hey, why are you going to the TLM? They'll say, oh, well, that's because the TLM doesn't have a lot of the Vatican II stuff. And then asking about the Vatican II stuff, what they list is a bunch of spirit of Vatican II stuff. Things like removing completely the Latin, like that's not supposed to happen, or Gregorian chant, or a number of other things. All right, I'm sorry, I don't know why I have an itch in the back of my throat. My wife made some really good salmon, so like I don't understand. So all right, so let's see what the comments are saying, because like I'm trying not to. Chat gets in the way of the red and blue chart. All right, whoops. All right. Yep, that's kind of what I was saying. The raw number of progressive seminarians just fell off, and so we just have a larger percentage. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm showing the Cara distribution here, because it does kind of matches, but it doesn't quite completely match. No, I don't think so. That would really kind of suck right now. My mouth would be burning. All right, so when we're talking about that, it's really important from a standpoint of the priest being able to do something, right? Like, so if the bishop is still there and the bishop is not in line with what the priest wants to do, or vice versa, right? Because the bishop is where the authority comes from, and wherever the bishop is, the church is, right? Like what I believe it was Saint Ignatius said. So, I mean, it's not a small thing. So it's really the priest being in line with the bishop. If the priest is going against what the bishop wants, even if what the bishop wants is not good, there's going to be friction there, right? Like that's just basic politics. And I mean politics in the way of social interactions that deal with, engagements, transactions, contracts, responsibilities, stuff like that. So I'm using it very loosely. Although Biden is in my state right now, and I'm not too thrilled about it. But the idea though of the bishop being and the priest being in line is very important. And so if that's not happening, you're going to have kind of like this Thermopylae effect, right? Like the 300, where everything just kind of gets built up in this bottleneck, and you have this group of, not that they're the enemy, obviously. I'm not saying they're like the Persians or whatever, but people who want tradition. The priests want tradition, but the bishop is the one holding back everything. And so that's why we don't, like, that's one, I don't want to say that's the only reason why, but that's one of the reasons why we don't have reverent Novus Ordos everywhere. But they are increasing. They are starting to happen more often. And I'm hearing, like, ever since I started doing live streaming, I've gotten more and more people saying, oh yeah, in this state and that state and this state and that state, we're a Novus Ordo that does all the things that you're saying. We don't have an altar rail. Usually that's like a big thing because that deals with approval of the bishop, and a lot of bishops still don't approve altar rails, or they don't design movable ones like we did. And so you have a lot of people coming out and saying, hey, we're actually doing all of this stuff, and it's great to hear. And if you don't read my comments, like not my comments but other people's comments on my videos, please do that, because you're going to see a lot of people who are saying, like, this is what we do, this is what we're trying to do, this priest that just came in just did what you said. And it's really great to hear that, because it means that it's not isolated, right? Even if it's an anecdotal sample, it's a snowball sample, that's what we would call it. It reveals that it is not an isolated thing in the Archdiocese of Detroit, right? And so it's not a unicorn, or at least it's not as big of a unicorn as people think it is. And given that, like I said before, the Novus Ordo is the biggest, like, that's what people have the most access to. Not everybody has access to a TLM. It's really important that we promote this, where people are getting access to reverent traditional liturgies that are the path, like, that is the actual passing down of what we were supposed to have. Like I said in my previous thing, a traditional Novus Ordo is not trying to be the TLM. By its nature, it has everything it needs to be reverent and to be traditional. Okay. It is not, I totally admit that it is not as beautiful and let's just say full as the TLM, but like it can still be reverent, it can still be traditional, and not simply try, it's not simply trying to be what the TLM is. Okay. So it's excuse me. Let's see. Right. So it gives hope to the folks who don't have that yet. Right. Because, like, that's part of, like, why I'm promoting all of this stuff. That's why I'm going over, like, these based priests. Like, because, at the end of the day, like, there is like, once the floodgates open, I think what we'll see is a massive turnaround on the parishes, on the parish level. I think you will see a lot of priests just going, hey, okay, my bishop's completely okay with this. And I have parishioners that are promoting Gregorian chant and music and ad orientem. They want to see that. They're telling me, they're being boisterous. They're not just sitting and complaining online. They're going to their pastor and they're saying this. And they're doing it. Like, and it's a great, like, it, I anticipate, like, this will happen, like I said, in 5 to 10 years. Because there's, like, when you look at this distribution, like, it's like, I think right now we do have a lot of conservative priests. Orthodox priests, right? Like, according to the survey. And so I think we have a lot of Orthodox priests. And I think that's really important to understand, because just like how it feels, like, I don't know if you feel this, but I do when it comes to politics and other things in the world, it feels like something's about to happen. right? Like there's this kind of like anticipation, especially with what's going on with the presidential election. It's not great, right? Like it sucks, and things are happening in really weird ways. Especially that press conference that happened yesterday. And it gives off this feeling of, kind of like anxiety. But like when you look at the priests, when you look at what the distribution of priests in the church, like what the data seems to suggest is that soon we will have, I'm not going to say a reversal, right? Like I'm not going to say a reversal. I don't want to give that impression that it's a reversal, because it's not quite a reversal. But you will see the fullness, I believe, you will see priests bringing out the fullness and richness of the Mass of the Novus Ordo in a way that has never been done before. Because frankly, it hasn't. It's always been from the drop of the hat. Like when it happened, it's been like it literally started with clown masses and very loosey-goose, like abuses and innovations happened everywhere. And it was from the get-go. I really do think that over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to just see a bunch of priests go like, no, the Novus Ordo is supposed to be like this, because that's what Vatican II says. And that's what this says. And they're going to cite the proper documents, and they're just going to move forward in the way you're supposed to move forward as conservatives, as Orthodox, traditionally minded individuals should be moving forward. And so I don't know. I don't mean to make it as dramatic as I'm trying to, but it's a really big deal, because I think so many people have lost like any willingness to fight for the Novus Ordos that they have around them, or they, like, not to say like, if you have responsibilities like children and you want to make sure that they are in a very good congregation, by all means, I'm not second guessing your decision. That is not what I'm saying. But there is an aspect though of, if you're at a Novus Ordo and you're just like, wow, the boomers and older people are just going to have like their way, literally just start opening your mouth about things in a charitable way. Obviously, don't do anything ridiculous, but like open your mouth and make sure you're known, because the data is suggesting that the priests that are, the more and more of the priests that are in front of you, that are serving Mass, that are distributing the Eucharist, that they are more and more Orthodox than they were 10 years ago. Well, we know that for a fact, because they're dying off and they're retiring. And they're retiring at a higher rate than the priests that are coming in. And so we need to also show these men support. And so that's my little pep talk. So like that's all right. So I like there's a Reverent Mass Finder, and even more so that our pastor has it on the parish website. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So again, I only bring up my main thing for bringing up my parish is not to be like, oh, well, like I have it so much better than you. Like that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing it to show that there is hope. There is a way to bring about change in a parish if you find a good priest and you support him, and you don't, like, you treat him like your father, like really. And I mean that, because I think we look at priests as a dispenser of the sacraments, as a religious CEO, and we have to look at them as what they are, which is our spiritual fathers, and to treat them with the respect and honor that they deserve, given how they've sacrificed their life to be in that position. So that's my second pep talk. So there's that. Right. Exactly, Mark. So like, and I cannot overstate this enough, demographics and time are on the side of the trads. And that's exactly what I'm showing here. That is exactly what I'm showing here. Let's see. So, all right. First, I'm just doing this halfway through because that's what I've started to do. If you're with me so far and have been with me, please like this video. You don't have to share it. You don't even have to subscribe. Just like it. That'd be nice. All right. So going back to what we're talking about. Yep. Yeah. Right, because of how long it takes. Yeah. So like because of how long it takes to get into seminary, and then how long it takes to pass through it. You know, for a while there was definitely a time where they were not allowing more conservative priests. Like, this is noted in a lot of different places where certain seminaries were barring even people who are reading Pope Benedict the 16th stuff, like his books. Like that's clearly a problem, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're reading Pope Benedict the 16th like book. You're gonna get removed from the seminary. Like, what? Like, this is the most ridiculous thing. But it happens. There's a lot of weird contradictions that happen within the church. A lot of them. And it's with people that have a particular mindset. And it's unfortunate, but those people seem to be leaving, whether by retirement or death. And it's a good thing, not that they're dead, like, pray for them, obviously, but but in terms of like getting, like, correcting the boat, so it's not off course anymore. Because I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, if you look at I'm gonna leave that up there because that's what we're talking about. But like, in the other part of the Kara study here in the Excel, which is downloadable from the Kara, the Georgetown, I don't remember the full name, but it's a Catholic group that looks at the church and puts out statistics of the church, and it's a really good organization. That you see this increase in the laity. Like, we're at like 66 to 70 million Catholics in the United States, right? The problem is that we have about 20% that go to mass on a regular basis every week, which back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, that was more in the area of 40, 45, 50, 55%, right? And so we may have gotten more people, and many of them have received confirmation, but like, what are they doing? Like, by and large, based off that statistic, they're being lukewarm in their faith because they're not going to mass every Sunday, and that's a precept of the church. Which, if you don't know the precepts of the church, they're just let you know, because I didn't know for a while growing up. But the precepts of the church are simply the bare minimum of what the church expects you to do. And if you do them, then you have a pretty good chance of getting into heaven, right? Like, that's, again, the bare minimum. And if you're not going to mass every Sunday, like, that's a pretty big problem. So Dad, can we have incense this weekend? I didn't do the dad part, but I did say, can we have incense this weekend? And like, okay, so here's the thing. If they're like, oh, well, like, incense is really expensive, don't be afraid to be like, okay, well, how much is it? I'll pay for it for the next year. Because, or the next month or something. Like, don't be afraid to do that. Like, show that you're committed. Show that you're, because like, that's something I did. He didn't take me up on it at that point, but like, that has to do with when he was introducing it to the parish, which we later did. But it was just this idea of if you're going to suggest traditional things, especially when it comes to things that need to be bought on a regular basis, which incense definitely has to, like, do it. Be like, specifically, I will buy the incense for mass, because it'll show your commitment to what you're trying to preach, right? Like, what you're trying to promote to the priest. And he's the one doing the mass, right? Like, he's the one putting everything up on the altar and in the sanctuary. And so it's really important to then present that in a positive way that's supportive of him. And so, writing a check out or saying, here's like $50 for incense. I don't know what the rate is right now. But it's something to do. And that's the, if you want like a kneeler, so say for example, the crazy, I can't even imagine a parish doesn't have a kneeler, but in case that they don't, I mean, that's another thing you could offer to buy, because again, this is something where you're putting your money where your mouth is, quite literally. And you're saying, I'm willing to make sacrifices in my budget to help you do this. Because most of us that go to mass, right, are not really wealthy. Like, we're going paycheck to paycheck, just like the average in America. We are trying to do our best, and we want, bare minimum, like a good reverent mass and in our parish, while also like supporting the parish and other functions. But again, like, if you're able to offer paying for it, because that'll go a long way. Like, that is a very deep gesture to say, I will specifically buy this thing on a regular basis, so that in mass you're able to do that. Like, when you're providing for the mass, that isn't just for you but for everybody. Like, just think of, like, reflect on that. Like, that's a really good thing. Now, and don't boast about it, obviously, like, but like, well, I said it earlier, so now I feel like, ignore what I said earlier, okay? But like, it's just something where you're able to move forward, right? Like, in the parish, and help the priest. So yep. So if there's not anything else, I will let you guys go, and I hope you guys had a very happy and penitential Friday. And if there's any questions about anything else, like, I'm still getting questions about the music video that we did. Not that I did any songs or anything, but for sacred music with Dominic, we are going to be doing a follow-up with that, going more into detail, because we have been getting a lot of questions, and some of them are just, all right, how do we do this? And we're going to explain it in more detail, how to do this, because that's one of those things that I think we are lacking when it comes to those of us that are in front of cameras. Is we will say and pontificate all these things, but we won't try to help those that are fighting at the parish. Like, you'll just say like a lot of like big platitudes, maybe even generalizations that resonate, but don't necessarily, like, they're not actionable. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to help with, because we need to be actionable. And a lot of my videos, I've just gone over how I helped my priest and how my priest did what he did, because that's really important, and it reflects a relationship between a father and a son, as opposed to just a random person who happens to go at this parish and this priest who happens to do these sacraments. It's a father and a son relationship. It's a daughter and a father relationship. Help your father, get things moving. And basically, yeah, I'll say it, watch more videos, because we're going to go over exactly how to do that. So yeah, so all right, there doesn't seem to be anything to chat, but I do want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. All right, thanks everybody.